it's probably a stupid question, but who here likes the Beatles? Yeah, almost everyone in the world likes the Beatles. And I find this actually to be a really interesting question, because I take it from personal experience that this isn't just because of product placement and production values. The reason why is because I didn't really know who the Beatles were, wait for it, till I graduated from college and came to grad school, and someone gave me an album, and I suddenly said, oh, that's the Philip Magnavox song. And all of a sudden I discovered that the Beatles were actually this group that made all the songs and all the commercials I'd grown up with. And I blame my parents for this, because I grew up with Sinatra and Elvis and classical music. So I became very interested in them, and I got a fake book, which is, you know, just the chords and the melody. In fact, here is a sort of a lead sheet, which is what these fake books are for. It just has the lyrics and the melodies and the chords. And I was classically trained, and so I just started playing through these without hearing the production value. And they blew me away. And I couldn't understand, for instance, the chords they were using and what the relation was to each other. In fact, Bob Dylan is quoted as saying that the harmonies the Beatles used totally blew him away, that no one has ever since written music like that. And so I came into contact, I don't even remember how, with a guy named Michael Cuthbert. This is a really interesting guy, and he has an idea, which is to create a software library for music informatics. And it's unlike anything that's been out there before, because unlike health and stocks, there ain't no money in music, much less people with strong technical ability willing to sacrifice their Google job to invest heavily in this. One thing that surprises a lot of people, for instance, is a lot of people think that because we have, you know, Finale and Sibelius interfaces for creating lead sheets like this, that it would be easy to scan this in and create something useful in terms of information. But actually, OCM or OMR or whatever it's called is actually pretty poor. It sort of suffers from the rest of the music industry in this regard, that there just aren't enough man hours to solve this actually very complicated question. The second thing is, it's also the same problem with MP3s. Malcolm Gladwell came up with an article that literally sent me into seizures, because it just made me so angry. Because he seemed to imply in this that we could somehow funnel MP3s into computer code and discover whether it would become a hit, like a musical hit. What he didn't point out was that what was actually going on is there were 1,000 chimpanzees at typewriters, okay, not really chimpanzees, people who were hired, to listen to music and write down, oh, it's a guy singing. Oh, that beat's pretty fast. That's a country tune. And they created a database out of it. And the way they present it to everyone is as if they're doing this very deep analysis from, you know, the songs. They really gloss over the fact that we're not at a point where we're getting the information about chords, melodies, even lyrics at any sort of detailed level to understand questions like, why does everyone freaking love the Beatles? And it's an outstanding question, obviously. So I'll present for you guys a little snapshot into a project I started about 2 years ago. This was sort of my nighttime project while working on my PhD. And about a year ago, my thesis began. So it has been sort of left fallow. And my goal actually this summer is to get back to it and write a paper on it and maybe find someone else who would like to take the reins and do something more with it. So here is my favorite song in the entire world, Strawberry Fields Forever. If you guys don't know it, I guess I could play it. That might break some ASCAP rules. But most people know it, so I probably don't have to go through it much. And here's another lead sheet I did for comparison. And here's an example of how we do the data. So what I actually use is MediaWiki, the software underlying Wikipedia. And I worked with Michael Cuthbert at MIT to create a language. And here's an example of this language. We call it tiny notation. And what it allows you to do is, in this case, what it allows you to do is you put in the note value, which is the pitch, the length, either eighth notes, quarter notes, the chord associated with it, if there's a chord change, and the syllable associated with it. And then we also extended the language to include things like time signature changes and other metadata that you can sort of throw in at any point. The idea was by putting these guys in and a little bit of other metadata, you can construct the full song from a bunch of small inputs. The reason why this is important is because if you get a time value off on a small part of the song, it cascades through the whole thing. So you need to be able to divide it up into smaller pieces that can sort of be merge sorted into your final song. So yeah, so MIDI is really, I also hate MIDI because first of all, MIDI gives you notes and time values,
right,
and that's it.
Well, it gives you like a tack.
Yeah, no, it gives a lot of. So okay, yeah. So this is something that has come up when I've talked about this before. So for instance, we're not interested in production values. Mm-hmm. We're also not interested in questions like dynamics, mm-hmm, or like the very specifics of how something is executed. We're trying to get at the very basic level what are the melody notes as they would be written on a lead sheet, where are the chord changes, and what are the lyrics. MIDI is able to get you the notes, pitches, but they don't get you a sense of where the time value of those things, unless it's like very quantized in the time signature. So you lose a lot of rhythmic information. It's there and you can hear it, but it's not in a way that we can actually manipulate, because it has to be somewhat distilled in order for it to like fit on a lead sheet. So like, I don't know if you ever tried this, but if you try to like take a MIDI file and convert it to a lead sheet, it's actually awful. And you'll get little things like 30-second note rests, and it's just so much work, you just decide, okay, I'll just type it in myself. And so what this does is you put in this, here's actually a bunch of phrases, but this last one, Strawberry Fields Forever, is right here, and it produces a little snippet of music notation. And what I've done here also is I color the notes based on their tonic function. So if you'll notice in music notation, you have staff lines. This tells you sort of a background of where the pitch level is, right? And the key signature tells you what key you're in. And every song can be sort of transposed into another key, and most people without perfect pitch, which is like 90+ % of the American population, can't tell the difference. And so what this key signature is telling you is which notes matter. And in the song, in a song, if you guys have ever done like 1, 2, 3, 4, God, I can't sing for crap. But if you do like do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do, mi, and sol are the important notes. Those are stability notes. If you end a song on that note, you'll feel a sense of completion. If you end a song on a different note, it will sound unstable. It has to be resolved. This is one of the constructing elements of melody. And so I actually colored these notes. And so, for instance, these blue notes are sort of unstable tones, but don't sound too weird. Red notes are really chromatic, and that's important because essentially you'll do a lot of mistakes. And the way you can tell you made a mistake is it went to some really weird note that wasn't supposed to be there, like this little red note. But that guy was actually supposed to be here because, in fact, here's one of their very unusual chords here, a major 6, which you almost never see in this context. And very particularly, you never see with the chords that follow before and afterwards. So I'll just give you guys a little bit of data vomit on what we did with this. So if you guys have ever gone to like a music class, even like in high school, they'll tell you about the circle of fifths. And this tells you from classical music that you want to go in music that goes counterclockwise around the circle of fifths. 2, 5, 1. Actually, those 3 chords there form the entire basis of jazz music. A shocking amount of jazz music is just those 3 chords with different embellishments. And so what's interesting about this song is, for all of its unusual qualities, is that it actually has a very limited harmonic vocabulary that isn't actually particularly unusual except for that major 6. And you can, I said there was data vomit. This is sort of how you figure out what you're going to try to do of use here. So here also looks at the intervals, note-to-note intervals. And so this isn't really so much in a circle of fifths as just the unison plus a minor second plus a major second. There's a lot of emphasis on repeating notes. This is a John Lennon signature, actually. Other songs that use this is Help. Da 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 da. It's almost all unison. Lady Gaga is also a real genius at this because she sets up these plateaus at these different points in the song. So you'd be sort of lulled into complacency here, then she'll shoot you up, and then you get to that chorus and you're about to pull your hair out and drop some E. But what's really cool is this idea of the circle of fifths is very generational. And so you can take those notes, whose intervals I was showing before, and also plot these like you were doing the chords. And so one of the salient features you'll notice about this is the strong emphasis over here. That should initially not be too surprising for those familiar with scales, in that all of these guys are your chromatic notes over here. And the only way you're able to get into them is by shifting your tonality to make them seem right. But what's also interesting here is, as opposed to emphasizing this 1, 5, and 3, which are down here, this 2 plays a very prominent role. And in fact, there's a good reason why that 2 plays a prominent role. It's because the opening line is, living is easy with eyes closed. It's actually on that 2. He actually begins the song completely unstable on a 5 chord, which is the most unstable chord that most wants to be resolved. This is actually something you could find out by looking at the lead sheet if you were well trained. What I was curious about was, once you develop these data metrics, could you find sort of a design principle, so to speak, for songs? And I wouldn't say we quite got there, but this is sort of part of the steps of building our intuition on what those pieces might be. There's other ways of visualizing the same information. So for instance, you can actually arrange the notes according to their closeness to the tonic. So here's your 1, 3, and 5 again, with this offset over to the 2. There's a lot of ways to look at this. For instance, one thing you'll find with a lot of popular music is that the pitch percentiles will grow dramatically between the verse and the chorus. It's actually a really fun quantity to study, right? Because this is something that we suspect might actually change over time. And so this song falls sort of in the perfect stereotype of this. The verses are extremely close range with a few extreme notes, but as soon as you bring the chorus, your range doubles, at least in the middle 2 quartiles, and also in the extreme notes as well. So you could, you could just go on and on and on about this stuff. It's really cool. There's a really fun result here, which at first, maybe I'm underplaying this because I've seen this stuff so much. But I think this is really cool. So remember before when I showed this picture of the interval transition circle? Well, what would happen if you just display this as a graph? So here what you're seeing is the results when you have 3 notes in succession. So you can have notes that form an arch. Da, 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 or a dip, da, 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 an ascending line, da, 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 descending, da, da, da. And so it should not be surprising, for instance, that the singer is unlikely to start going into exponentially higher pitches. So the transition rate from an ascending interval to another ascending interval is going to be lower than an ascending interval to a descending interval. This is something you would actually expect. And so that's what this general transition, this sort of correlation, if I were to do this, tells you. So it's color-coded based on overall probability, and then the numbers tell you along each line what the percentage is for each line, for instance. And so there's a strong connection. We have our unison here, those 2s, but we also have here a strong emphasis on going between small descending intervals. So small descending lines are very common. And actually, it's interesting that this shows up in this piece. This has actually been observed and quantified in classical music. Because of this conservation of range, if you have a lot of small downward intervals, you necessarily have to have also a lot of large upward intervals. And so this is actually a characteristic signature of a lot of Western music of somewhere over the rain. You do a large leap up and then slowly come down, and Strawberry Fields Forever is no exception to this. So what can you come out of use of this? I talked with professors at Berklee College of Music, because if you're going to learn how the best songs get written, you talk to the best people in the world about how you teach this. And what I learned was, here's an example. Actually, I had this very nice discussion with Mike about this. I think Mike disagrees. I may not have convinced him. Maybe I can convince you. So first of all, let's ask a question, a very Edward Tufte kind of question. where is the ink? How do we allocate ink on the page for music? Now, obviously, you have your staff is probably the most prominent thing, but that's actually a background on which everything lays in front. Mike disagrees, but that's okay. I don't see too many pieces of music that don't have these staff lines, so I sort of filter that out. I don't feel like that counts as much. Same thing with this treble clef. That tells me a very small piece of information. It's essentially chart junk, in my opinion. Same thing with the key, because all songs in different keys sound the same if you all transpose them to the same key. And so when I look at this, what jumps out at me is the amount of ink that's required for rhythmic notation. Here's a bunch of eighth notes. We have a bunch of bars. We have a line going across. Here we have also a line coming down. This gives us a flag. Here's a tie to tell us a lot of rhythmic information. And why is that? Because music notation was created for people to see it and perform it without having heard it before. And rhythm is the most salient element of music. I don't know if you've ever done this experiment. If you ever get a song stuck in your head, you can clap it out, and you'll swear to God that encapsulates the entire song. And you can like go up to someone and clap this thing, and they'll be like, "What the fuck are you doing?" And you'll be like, "No, well, of course, that's the song." And you can ask the most musically like asinine individual out there to sing a melody for you, and you'll almost always get the right rhythm, even if their melody notes are all off. What is reserved on the page for pitch are just simply where the note heads are, right, vertically. So my question was, let's simplify this information. Create a normalized visualization so that you can take song A, song B, and get rid of a lot of the crap, which actually makes it very hard to visually see what's salient here. And so what this does is, instead of using a staff, which is actually to place, also the reason we use the staff in chromatic notation is so that you can take an instrument and play it and know what the exact pitches are. And so you don't have to transpose in your head. This is actually very difficult from a performance standpoint. Am I going over?
You could wrap up in a few minutes.
Okay. So what I decided to do was replace the staff with the 1, 3, and 5. And so that's actually what these dark lines here are in the background. And then to sort of not really care about the rhythm, because if I know the song, the rhythm is very easy for me to remember. And so what this does is if you've ever used like Logic or any kind of these nonlinear editors, they'll create piano rolls. And you'll actually find, Mike actually showed me some really lovely visualizations on YouTube of ways you can visualize things, do something very similar. You have sort of like with MIDI, right? You have your note placement, you have, and then the amount of time. But because we have all this other information, and it's very well quantified, what we can do is ask questions like, is this note syncopated? And so we can bring this down along this line here, and also connect it with the chord changes that are coming along here. And if you've heard a song, you probably know its rhythm, and actually from this, I can actually play most songs, as long as I know what the rhythm is. I admit it's poor for representing rhythm, but what it makes up for that is the ability to isolate visually where the important, interesting points in the song are from a compositional point of view, and where the motives are. And so one of the questions is there anything I've used this for? Is there any result I found that I couldn't have found from a lead sheet? And so I'll present that for you guys right here. It's right here in the chorus. I just absolutely love this. Okay, so first of all, a little bit of background. This verse right here uses 5 minor 6, 4, and 1. If you guys have ever checked like New York Times blog, the 1, 5, 6, 4 chord progression is probably the most common chord progression in all of popular music. You can actually find a blog where they will play for you all the top 10s and isolate where that chord progression is. Once you identify it and you go to enough open mics, you're ready to pull your hair out. It's quite impressive that with such a limited harmonic vocabulary, he created this verse. But that shouldn't be surprising because verses are always supposed to be less interesting than the chorus. For the same reason the note ranges are smaller, so should be your harmonic vocabulary. Where the harmonic vocabulary gets exciting is in the chorus. And this is where he takes you down, to Strawberry Fields. He first starts off by taking you on this 1. He goes into a minor 5, which is a modal chord. This is unusual harmony. And then he takes things into a really bizarre world with this major 6. This is something you would just very much not expect in this music. And I was looking at this, and of course, probably the most obvious motive here is Strawberry Fields, nothing is real. He adds this chromatic twinge right here that lets it fall into this major 6. That's a pretty clear motive that he's manipulated here. What I didn't see beforehand, though, until I did this, was that both of these are reflected in this motive right over here. And so what he's actually doing is the following. Let me take you down, 'cause I'm going to strawberry fields. What he's done is this going to strawberry fields is actually like a mirror. And he's placed you into this modal quality, so that has a really strange kind of quality to it, and then he distorts it. So it's not just that he did some sequence where he changed the note value and made it sound kind of funky, but he prepared you for that sequence. And one of the hypotheses we have, and some of the other visualizations I don't have a chance to get to, have suggested this may be the case, and we're interested in quantifying this for a paper, is that these very unusual chords do not show up out of nowhere, are not merely supported by sequences that are strange, or sequences that sort of support it, but may actually be preceded by notes in that chord that are concurrent with the key. So when you add in a strange chord, there's usually one or two notes that is consistent with the key you're in. And we are led to believe right now that if you were to plot a correlation function of the onset of a chord to the melody notes preceding it, you'd see a high correlation leading up to these chords of these notes that coexist in that chord and the key. So that sort of sums up what we did here. I hope I didn't overwhelm you all.
So,
I have a question.
Yeah, sure.
So you're a musician?
Yeah.
Okay. So what I'm wondering is, with all of this really kind of interesting knowledge, do you feel like this has made you a better musician or a better songwriter?
Absolutely. One of the quotes I read. Well, see, so when I studied music in college, I never once imagined I'd ever compose. And it wasn't until I heard the Beatles and became so curious about understanding how they worked that composition started happening almost, what's the word? Just spontaneously. And I actually found that I wasn't the only one who discovered this. Most of the major composers have said that the way they trained themselves on music composition was by literally transcribing by hand the great works of the people they admired. And once you put in a database of 200 songs by your favorite group, which is really hard, I imagine that probably twisted some strange organ in my brain. Has not made me useless to society, but useful for music.
So does your music sound like the Beatles? Can you not help but sound like the Beatles?
If only it could sound as good as the Beatles. It's still my dream to one day have that problem.
Let's take one last question if there are any more right now.
PostScript is they had to have a lot of hinting that is based on how to best do the representation of it, as opposed to a construct that then made you follow the. I'm describing it poorly, but PostScript, looking at the insights of PostScript might actually be helpful.
Well, there's actually a file format called Music XML, which sort of attempts to do a lot of what you're talking about. But what ends up happening is it ends up being a poor file format, because people end up tweaking it to get the visual effect that they're looking for. I don't know if there's an easy solution, and the fact that there are tenured professors in our country who have tried it and haven't succeeded suggests that it probably is actually fairly hard. But you're right. I think what they're doing with creating the simplified language, they had sort of a similar challenge. They created a simplified language. I came in and told them the tweaks they would need to make to accommodate popular music, which has different requirements. But then they told me that they had limited ability to do this. I had to create my own branch of the code in order to do this. Because what happened was everybody who was using this came back and they're like, oh, well, in Italian Renaissance music, the tessitura has like these 3 variations, and they affect, if you were to do statistics on the note values, you're going to have like, and exactly how many of these is indicated by the length of they got so many specialized requests that they actually had to lock it down. And so that's how we developed the comment system to let people sort of do whatever they want with it. But then you end up in the XML situation where now there's just so many tweaks and there's no standard body on it. So that also becomes a challenge. I know this is the end of the question and answer, but If anyone would like to talk to me about this afterwards, you can also email me at my email address, which is just my name, douglasmason@gmail, because even though I'm extraordinarily busy right now trying to graduate, I would really love to hear what anyone has to say, or if anyone would like to contribute to the project.
Thank you.